I want to know whatever Hugo Viana has had for breakfast on Monday morning because it must be rocket fuel. That man is making moves like we've not seen in a single day. Well, possibly ever. Welcome back to the City Ramble, where I'm just trying to screw my head back on because it's been doing this all day, trying to keep up with all of the information, doing our very best to keep you across it. So if you can support the channel, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you want to speak about all of these transfer rumours and news and squad planning and all of the discourse and the debates around it, get involved in the City Ramble Discord. I can promise you today it has been popping off. Well, no, at the time of recording, it's only Monday afternoon and I've got to scroll through about 300 messages. It has been going wild with all the news, and understandably so, because where do you even begin? Let's start with the statement news. The big news. Not quite a full bombazza just yet, but it's close. It's a half bombazzo. It's a nice little appetizer, I feel like. But Fabrizio Romano is saying that Manchester City are exploring possible replacements for Savinho. Obviously, if you haven't checked the video that we did about Savinho earlier today, you're going to have 3 videos at least today, so do make sure to hit that subscribe button. We are treating you. I'll tell you what the third one is about a little bit later on. But Fabrizio Romano reporting about Savinho news. We did a video on that earlier today, so check it out after this one. That Rodrigo, Hala Madrid, Rodrigo, the Brazilian winger is amongst the replacements that City are currently looking at. And, I mean, wow. Wow, talk about a big name, because that it's taking. You can see I'm at almost literally speechless because of the development that we've seen it at breakneck speed. There's also been claims in different outlets that Xavi Simons, City could possibly look to hijack a move for Xavi Simons. Less sold on that. Maybe touching it at the end of this vid. But in terms of the Rodrigo news, I feel like for me, this does a 180 on the Savinho situation. And I'm not going to lie, I addressed plenty of the what I considered issues in our video earlier today. But I do think there are more questions than answers with Savinho. The fact that the fee, for example, is being spoken about as so low. And even still, I said it in that video, I don't know if 50 million quid is good value for him. I don't know if 55 million quid, 60 million quid is good value. When you look around the Premier League and European football in general, the amount of money that's being spent on wide players, is Savinho a better player than Anthony Elanga? Has he got more potential? Is he worth investing in more? Yeah, absolutely for me. So, I'm not totally sold on this. And if you'd have asked me yesterday, I wouldn't have wanted to sell Savinho at all. But obviously, breakneck speed, things like this move at rapid speed. And it does look like City are going to go into the market and replace Savinho if, as is looking likely, he goes on to join Tottenham Hotspur. 100 million euros is the valuation that Real Madrid have. So that's about, 86 million quid? The same sort of price that City paid for Josko Gvardiol. It's not cheap by any means. It's not massively expensive. I think, looking at a similar price that Liverpool paid for Ekitike and Sesko for Man United for Sesko, it's around that sort of bracket that you'd expect it to come in at. If you can bag a decent fee, in my eyes, I reckon 70 million quid would be a really good fee for Savinho. That's a no-brainer, isn't it? That's a no-brainer because let's speak about the player himself. Rodrigo, for me, is one of the few options on the market that comes in and elevates City attack immediately. Immediately. There's no bedding in period. There might be a bit of a bedding in period as he gets to learn Guardiola's style and whatnot, but it isn't a project player. It isn't let's see in 2 years' time if this guy's going to develop, and he might be world class. The amount of times that we've spoke about City's attackers in recent years, and the underline, the italicized, the bold statement of it all is might be. He might one day become world class. I might one day become a world class footballer. Is it looking likely? No, it's absolutely not. I'm not sort of throwing shade on these players because I do think the players that City have in their ranks, some of them, do have that potential. I see the vision. But when you're challenging for titles, as Guardiola will demand and want to be, you kind of do need a mix of both. You need guys who are ready to do it now. You need guys who are going to not necessarily demand as many minutes, but can come in and make an impact, and you can develop on, develop with them like that. You can't have four guys who are all projects, because you're just not going to get the returns. You're not going to get the returns in terms of goals, assists, challenging for trophies, whatever. So this for me is a move that, if there's a semblance or an even sort of a mini, like the smallest crumb of possibility with Rodrigo, with Savinho, at the moment, why not go and do it? Why not go and do it? Why not go and get, one of the best wingers in world football, which Rodrigo undoubtedly is? And I know people are speaking about, we're picking up scraps from Real Madrid. Look, there are possibly two football clubs, maybe just Real Madrid themselves, where you say, yeah, if a player is out of favour there, them going to City, that isn't a bad move for City. Take on a smaller scale, for example, Cole Palmer was quote unquote City scraps when he left City for Chelsea. Chelsea aren't regretting that move now, are they? Sometimes you just need to give a player a different environment. They might be at a top club, but that's not necessarily considered a step down if they come and join you because they're not getting minutes there. And it just looks like Rodrigo fancies a different challenge. There has been so much talk about him all summer in terms of moving on. Liverpool have been mentioned, Arsenal have been mentioned. I was a little bit surprised that we haven't seen anything, because it feels like he was, unless it's a valuation issue, it feels like he was dead set on leaving. So yeah, I'm struggling to see a real downside for this at the moment. People saying, well, he might take minutes off Marmoush, he might take minutes off Oscar Bob, he might take minutes off Doku. Was that an issue when Riyad Mahrez was in the team and Phil Foden was coming through and Raheem Sterling was banging goals in, and City had all of these great players, Gabriel Jesus as well. City, ideally, if they reach the last stage of the Champions League, go deep in one or two of the cups. You're talking 60-odd games a season, minimum. There are plenty of minutes for these guys to go around. So for me, that isn't an issue. You want a squad full of players that are wanting to fight with each other. You also want that little bit of versatility. Obviously, Rodrigo more so, I guess, than the right-hand side. He tends to play off the left-hand side a little bit more. Maybe, I know he can play off the right-hand side, but I think the report or the briefing is that he wants to be a left winger. Whatever. I'm sure he will play minutes on the left wing. I'm sure he'll play minutes on the right wing. He might even be able to go down the middle a little bit if Erling Haaland is out and he works with Marmoush. This opens doors. This pulls levers, in my opinion, that Simmons, for example, great player, great talent. But for me, again, that's a little bit of a project. That's maybe in a couple of years' time, the investment might pay off. I think he's a great young talent. Obviously, he's been around for God knows how many years now. It feels like he's probably, it feels like he should be in his 30s because he has been around since he was so young. But that would be great, maybe, in my opinion, next summer. That's not going to happen because he's obviously going to move this summer. If it's not to City, it's Chelsea. If it's not to Chelsea, it'll be somewhere else. But that, to me, kind of feels like a little bit of a Bernardo replacement next year. Annoyingly, it looks like City will miss out on that. Unless they go over after Simmons. I don't know. But it just feels like the logical path here is the Rodrigo move. What I find interesting, though, by the way, again, if you're enjoying the video, if you're enjoying the coverage on the City Ramble channels, YouTube, social media, etc., do hit the like button in the description. Subscribe if you haven't already, and of course, get in that Discord. It's been popping off. What I do find interesting about this, though, is we mentioned it in the first video today about Savinho leaving. The homegrown quota is still an issue. Even if Echeverri leaves, even if Stefan Ortega leaves, City are still sat there with 18 non-homegrown players for a Champions League registration that only allows 17. So, shock, spoiler, Rodrigo isn't homegrown. He grew up in Brazil, not Burnage. So he's going to come in as a non-homegrown player like Savinho was, and that would still keep City at 18. So I'm wondering in my head, do we see a late exit for one of the midfielders? Gundogan, perhaps? Kovacic, perhaps? If not, what does that mean for the registration squad? Because one player would have to sit out. Do you say because Kovacic could be out until October, there's no point in putting him in the squad? Okay, fairs, whatever. What happens when January comes around and City have got to redo the squad because the, fingers crossed anyway, are in the knockout stages of the Champions League. That, I think, like I said at the top, with the Savinho issue, the Savinho deal, that is still a question mark. This is still a question mark. Overall, as exciting as the Rodrigo news is, at the back of my mind, I'm still sat here going, this doesn't sound like great squad planning. I'm not going to lie. This is the only downside that I can think of at the moment. I do try and sort of analyse it from both sides, if you like. What are the pros? What are the cons? And it does feel like doing this 6 days out before the end of the season. Look, this might well have not been the plan. And in that case, you say, fair enough, they're moving quickly. It could be that James Maddison went down injured for Spurs. They lost Heung-min Son. They're exploring options. They've got a bit of cash to burn because they won the Europa League. They're back in the Champions League. They want to make a statement signing. They've identified Savinho. The price might work out well for Spurs. I'm hoping it works out better for City because I still think it's a bit of a risk letting a 21-year-old who had a decent first season in the Premier League. Maybe they're seeing red flags in training for Savinho that we don't get to see. I don't know. But I think, maybe it is as simple as the fact that Spurs have set off this chain reaction and City are just reacting to it themselves. Maybe that's what's happening here. I don't know. But it does... It doesn't scream, usually in transfer markets and whatnot, we've seen City have their business done and dusted, shut up shop, they're not selling, they get to this day, no one else is leaving, blah, blah, blah. It maybe feels a little bit haphazard, but hey, that's football. Sometimes that's football. These deals present themselves. Something that you expect to happen doesn't happen. All of that sort of business explodes and then suddenly you're left needing to check your list of shortlists and your list of players on the shortlist, and then suddenly, boom, Rodrigo joined City. That's hopefully anyway, because I do feel like that would be a boost to the squad. It'd be an improvement to the squad. Again, reiterating, I don't necessarily want to see Savinho go. That could turn out to be a Cole Palmer, or it could turn out to be a Brahim Diaz. To be fair, that's maybe harsh because Brahim Diaz has had a great career at Real Madrid, but he hasn't I don't think anyone's sat there necessarily regretting letting Diaz go. Maybe I'm speaking, to the wrong crowd. Maybe people do, but you get what I'm coming from. Not every player that City sell is going to be a Cole Palmer. Sometimes they'll cash in and sometimes they won't do as well. That's football. But it's just been a crazy, crazy day of news. James McAtee looks like he's off. This is just picking up the other pieces. Usually, these would be full videos themselves. But James McAtee looks like he's off. Grealish is going to go out on loan. There's an option to buy in that. Although 50 million quid option to buy in summer 2026 for Everton. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that is absolutely not happening. So that's possibly one of the most pointless clauses of all time. Hey, I really do hope Jack Grealish has a great time at Everton. Obviously, World Cup year, he wants to get back in the England squad. Anything else that we might have missed? Who knows? By the time this video goes up, probably signed 6 more players and 5 of them are getting sold as well. I don't know. That's kind of the day we're on. I did mention there's a third video today for you to keep an eye out on for. That's later on. It's the Palermo panel reaction, so make sure you're looking out for that. Until next time, though, and goodness knows what's going to be next time, we will see you later.